With great power comes great responsibility. This line represents everything that makes Spider-Man great. He's not a billionaire with gadgets staring into the abyss, and he's not an overpowered alien that learned to become human. Spider-Man is just a normal guy who happened to get superpowers by accident, and yet he must deal with everyday human life like the rest of us on top of his responsibilities of being a superhero. He's not perfect and he doesn't have his life together, yet he decides to do the right thing despite all the tragedies he has faced throughout his life. When Stan Lee and Steve Ditko created Spider-Man, they set out the goal that anyone could become Spider-Man, which I absolutely love because whether it's Peter Parker, Miles Morales, Miguel O'Hara, Hobie Brown, anyone could become Spider-Man, no matter what their background, race, or gender is. We all get to experience what it means to be Spider-Man, whether it's reading a comic book, watching a movie, or an animated show, or even playing a video game. For me, my first experience with Spider-Man was with Spider-Man the Animated Series. Then I got to see Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man in the movie theaters, and well, the rest was history. Seeing Peter evolve from a nerdy kid being bullied in high school by Flash Thompson to getting his powers and losing Uncle Ben inspired him to become Spider-Man. While the Marvel Spider-Man games skip over this era of Peter Parker's life since we have all seen those stories play out in different forms, it still stays true to the spirit of Spider-Man. This Peter has already been Spider-Man for over 10 years and has already met most of his villains. He's graduated from both high school and college, and he even has dated several women. Peter is all grown up, but still has financial problems which I could totally relate to as an adult, especially with this economy. Despite being behind on his rent, Peter doesn't hesitate to jump into action to save other people. Saving people first is always what Spider-Man must do, even if it means sacrificing time and commitment for your own personal life. Peter and Miles don't hesitate to jump into the action if it means keeping their city safe from villains like Electro, Rhino, Kraven, Venom, etc. Even before getting their powers, both Peter Parker and Miles Morales were good people at heart who were raised right. Peter grew up with Uncle Ben and Aunt May, and Miles had his dad Jefferson Davis, his mom Rio Morales, and his uncle Aaron all looking out for them. Despite losing friends and loved ones along the way, both never gave up. Both Peter and Miles had the chance to kill the men that took away their loved ones, but decided not to. This is what makes them even better, that despite having to stop terrible villains, they still hold back and try to save them as well, despite the villains trying to kill them. Peter was an ambitious scientist that dreamed of changing the world with Dr. Octavius, but even after Dr. Octavius became Dr. Octopus and he had to stop him, Peter still held on to the dream even when it hurt like hell, taking down his idol and mentor. Despite stopping the main villain, Peter ultimately had to make a difficult choice, whether to save the people of New York City from Devil's Breath or to save his Aunt May. Peter tried so hard to justify saving his aunt, but had to let her go even though it hurt so much. Miles was also a young student gifted in academics who idolized Spider-Man whenever he got to see him in action, and who wouldn't. Spider-Man also saved him from some guys that were looking to beat him up, and he gave him a few pointers on how to throw a punch. But just like Spider-Man, he would also lose a loved one. Miles lost his father at the City Hall bombing, where his father was being awarded for his bravery and in the line of duty. Miles was helpless to save his father from Martin Lee and had to say goodbye to his father. Both Peter and Miles would meet each other there, and it would be the start of their relationship and partnership. When Miles showed Peter his powers, Peter also revealed the secret and would take Miles on and his protege. Peter eventually left Miles in charge of New York, meanwhile he was on vacation with Mary Jane and Sicaria. Miles would reunite with his childhood best friend Finn Mason, who was secretly the Tinkerer. Miles would fight the Underground and learn of Finn's identity and what happened to her brother Rick. Despite understanding what Finn lost, Miles knew he would have to stop her. Miles eventually got through to her, but it was too late, and she sacrificed herself to help Miles save Harlem from Simon Krieger's new form. Despite both Peter and Miles losing people they love, they must honor their sacrifices as Spider-Man. Both Miles and Peter love New York City and its people and help many citizens out, like Howard and the homeless at the feast shelters spread throughout the city. Despite all the good Spider-Man does, there's several people that don't appreciate or acknowledge their efforts, and no, I'm not talking about the villains. No, I'm talking about people like J. Jonah Jameson. Most people in New York love Spider-Man, and you can even find murals of both Peter and Miles spread throughout the city. Many people consider Spider-Man to be a hero, even the cops and firefighters of the city. While there are two Spider-Men patrolling New York City, a whole lot of crime still happens, and it's up to your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man to stop them. One thing I love about the Spider-Man games is how they capture New York City. While I have not been there myself, it's just like I imagine from reading the comics to watching the animated shows and movies. It truly feels great to swing across New York City and see it from Spider-Man's point of view. While I'm scared of heights, swinging through the city always feels so peaceful and ambient. You can see how much work was designed to give New York its own identity in the games. From the colors to the sounds and the people, you can see how Spider-Man brings hope and change to the people of New York City. New York City is as much of a character character as Spider-Man is. Without New York, there would be no Spider-Man. New York is home to many heroes like the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and Daredevil, just to name a few. New York is also filled with villains and criminals like the Sinister Six, Kingpin, and Taskmaster. New York is a major part of Spider-Man's background because it's not only the city he grew up, but it's also the city he protects every day. Getting to feel what New York looks like from Spider-Man's perspective is amazing to explore in these games. In Spider-Man 2, we get to see more of New York, including Aunt May's house in Queens, where Peter grew up. I really like how Spider-Man 2 shows those flashbacks to Peter's time as a high school student and how he and Harry used to get in trouble. I also loved how they made young Peter look like a mix between Tobey Maguire and Ultimate Spider-Man. Bringing Harry Osborn back into Peter's life is a great morale booster since Peter's still mourning the loss of his Aunt May. We see how great it is for Mary Jane, Harry, and Peter to reunite since they have been friends since high school. Peter doesn't know that Harry has the symbiote attached to him, and it's what's keeping his disease from progressing any further. Miles, on the other hand, is still dealing with being a student at Brooklyn Visions, and he and his friends are trying to get into college. Everything begins to change when a new villain comes to New York City and starts targeting both villains and heroes. Kraven the Hunter is a terrifying villain who manages to kill several villains both on and off screen. Kraven has come to New York to perform his last hunt since Kraven has terminal cancer and wants to die doing what he loves, which is hunting. Animals are no longer challenged to Kraven, so he targets the superhuman population of New York. I gotta say, I love Spider-Man's 2 version of Kraven because this is probably the best adaptation that shows how scary and ruthless he can be. Kraven goes after the villains locked up at the raft, and it is there that Miles comes face to face with Martin Lee, the man who killed his father. Miles struggles with saving Martin Lee because Miles wants to hurt him for what he has done and almost leaves him to die. Peter learns that Harry has superpowers thanks to the symbiote when they are attacked at Coney Island. Harry also learns that Peter is Spider-Man. The way Peter and Harry interact still shows that they are best friends, but their dynamic slowly begins to shift when Peter almost gets killed by Kraven the Hunter and is severely injured. Harry transfers the symbiote to Peter to save his life, which does work, but slowly it's beginning to change his behavior. Peter becomes angrier and aggressive, especially when he fights Kraven's men. You can see the brutality of Peter's attacks in the symbiote suit. Peter also becomes angry and treats his own friends badly, especially Harry and MJ. There was even one part where Harry is begging for Peter to give him the symbiote back, but Peter gets angry at MJ and Harry. This really shows how much the symbiote is affecting Peter's behavior since Peter would never treat his friends this way. The situation gets crazier when Miles is captured by Kraven and he forces him to fight Martin Lee in a gladiator arena. Miles really is tempted to kill Lee and is winning the fight, but Martin Lee is holding back and doesn't want to hurt Miles. Martin Lee is sorry for his actions and slowly Miles gets over his anger at Lee and they work together to escape, but only Martin Lee escapes. This is Miles' true test of Spider-Man because putting your feelings aside and doing what's right is what Spider-Man must do every day to save people, even the villains who try to kill them. Martin Lee finds Peter and tells him where Miles is so he can go save him. Peter goes to rescue Miles but is ambushed by Kraven, who has become interested in hurting him since he has seen how brutal he is with the symbiote suit. Kraven deems this Spider-Man as worthy of killing him. Peter goes in and kicks his ass and has Kraven in a chokehold. Kraven tells Peter to stop holding back. Peter almost kills Kraven until Miles comes and saves him. Miles tries to reason with Peter, but the symbiote has a strong hold of him and they end up fighting each other. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it was scary to fight Peter with the symbiote suit, especially since I was playing the game on the hardest difficulty. Miles does eventually help Peter get the suit off, but even then, it's very hard for the symbiote to come off since it almost has completely bonded with Peter. Now that Peter is free, he slowly starts going back to his old self and he decides to destroy the symbiote at Oscorp. Harry happens to be there and fights Peter to reclaim the suits as their friendship has fractured and Harry's health has severely declined. The capsule that contained the symbiote breaks and Harry is transformed into Venom. Now, I didn't think we were going to play as Venom, but when we got to play as Venom, the brutality was just amazing and shocking for me. I was in utter disbelief how much mayhem and destruction we caused at Oscorp. Venom eventually escapes Oscorp and fights Kraven, and neither of them holds back and gives it their all. Despite his cancer, Kraven is doing very well fighting against Venom. Venom does beat Kraven and kills him in the most brutal way possible by eating his head. Immediately, you can see that Harry takes control and feels remorse for having killed Kraven. He goes to his mother's grave and it's there that Venom promises that they will kill everyone by spreading symbiotes across the globe. New York is thrown under siege by the symbiotes who are taking the citizens hostage as their hosts. It's up to Miles and Peter to stop the symbiotes from spreading. They both stop many hives and even develop sonic bombs that will help them in combating this new menace. During one of the confrontations with the symbiotes, Peter and Miles get overwhelmed but are saved by Martin Lee. Peter once again becomes infected and Martin Lee says he can save Peter. Both Miles and Martin Lee travel inside Peter's mind and battle many enemies, including the Sinister Six. Eventually, they make it to the core where there's a chance that both Miles and Lee could die. Miles tells Lee that he doesn't forgive him for killing his dad, but he can't hate him anymore. They both use their powers to reach Peter, who is mourning Aunt May in the hospital, and they bring him back. Martin Lee has lost his powers, but Peter has gained the anti-venom symbiote, which comes in real handy when facing the symbiotes, but also in destroying symbiotes that have taken citizens hostage. Peter, Miles, and MJ come up with a plan to stop Venom and the symbiotes for good. Miles and MJ get the meteorite that is powering up the symbiote invasion, and Peter fights Venom to distract them. Miles and MJ succeed, but Peter gets his butt whooped even with the anti-venom suit helping him. Venom realizes that they took the meteorite, and like a horror movie, Venom grows out wings and flies towards MJ and Miles. Miles has no choice but to fight Venom, and he does well, but he almost gets killed and is saved by MJ with a sonic grenade. Peter and Miles fight off Venom and try to save Harry by separating them. The way the action swelled up and the constant switching from Miles to Peter was so good. Venom comes close to winning, but Harry creates an opening for Peter to destroy Venom, but at the risk of killing them both. Venom is finally destroyed, and so is the meteor, which destroys the symbiotes plaguing New York City. Harry goes into cardiac arrest, and MJ and Peter believe they have lost him, but Miles uses his electricity powered as a defibrillator and brings Harry back to life. Harry goes into a coma, and Norman Osborn sees Spider-Man taking his son to an ambulance and blames him for what has happened to Harry. The doctor that treats Harry informs Norman that there's a small chance that Harry can come out of the coma. He gets upset and starts smashing things in grief, which honestly I can't blame him since he only has his son after losing his wife. Later, we see Norman go visit Otto Octavius, and he wants to know the identities of both Spider-Man's identities, which is a teaser for Spider-Man 3. Peter decides to take a break from being Spider-Man and leaves Miles in charge of New York City for a while. To be Spider-Man is to sacrifice your own life and to save the life of others. Spider-Man is an example that teaches us to be selfless and considerate of others, even the people that hate you. Anyone can become Spider-Man because there's a hero in all of us. While it's true life can be chaotic and throw so many problems your way, it's up to you how you deal with them. There's going to be lots of sacrifices along the way, but if you do what's right as best as you can, life will be better. While Spider-Man may be a fictional comic book character, I believe we can all live up to their examples. Spider-Man is just your average man with extraordinary circumstances that make him special. The Marvel Spider-Man games are truly amazing and encapsulate not only who Spider-Man is, but what he stands for. These games capture the true spirit of Spider-Man. If you enjoyed watching this video, leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content like this. If you want to get exclusive behind the scenes content, become a member today by hitting the join button. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure, and I'll see you on the next video.